2020 has been one hell of a year, like something straight out of Bizarro World. And to be honest, it's hit us in quite a few different ways. There's just no denying that. It came in hot with a global pandemic, followed up by a smidge of political chaos, and well, the list goes on and on. But perhaps the strangest, most challenging to digest fact of all is that the New England Patriots stink. Yeah, the New England Patriots, the same ones that are owned and operated by Robert Kraft and coached by Bill Belichick, look like a far cry from the Super Bowl contenders we've gotten used to. In fact, New England qualifying for the playoffs looks like a long shot at this point. The truth is, the word stink might actually be an understatement for this team. And while the I told you so crew might be eager to stick their noses up and earn their namesake, claiming that they are certain the post-Tom Brady era in New England would be disastrous for Belichick and the rest of the new-look Pats, well, if you ask me, that's a whole lot of hindsight right there. A whole lot. New England got off to a great start in 2020, running a completely different offense with a Cam Newton that looked rejuvenated and healthy. Not to mention a somehow even more motivated Bill Belichick who is eager to prove that he could do it without his former MVP quarterback. And then, all of a sudden, a team that was already bogged down with injuries had a COVID-19 outbreak that hit several players, including their new quarterback, and unsurprisingly, New England hit a skid. And wouldn't you know it, once they started to lose some games, everyone and their mothers started to come out of the woodworks and claim that they knew the Pats were gonna stink this year. You know what though? I'm not buying it. But there is one person who, when he talks about the Patriots and how or why they may or may not stink this year, well, I listen, and that is Bill Belichick. After all, he has been the team's head coach since 2000, and if you ask just about anyone, they'll tell you he is the greatest to ever coach in the NFL. It is just about the only GOAT discussion that isn't up for debate anymore. So, not exactly a bad guy to listen to if you want some insight. But it seems like even the great Bill Belichick has reached his boiling point when it comes to this bunch of players he has up in New England for 2020, as he was recently speaking out to the media about some of the struggles that the team has run into. "We were pretty heavily invested in our team the past few years," he said to the host and former Patriots assistant coach Charlie Weiss of SiriusXM Radio. "From a salary cap standpoint, we didn't have much flexibility at all. I think that was obvious on the Cam Newton contract. This is kind of the year that we've taken to, I would say. Adjust our cap from the spending that we've had in accumulation of prior years. We just haven't been able to have the kind of depth on our roster that we've had in some other years." Some folks in the media were quick to point out that Belichick's comments may have come at a pretty convenient time, right as the team was starting to struggle, when it was starting to look like they didn't quite have what it took to make a playoff run in the post-Tom Brady era. And you know what? When you look at some of the facts surrounding the Patriots' spending over the past few years, well, Belichick's detractors might just have a point on this one. The fact of the matter is that the Patriots have not exactly been big spenders during their unprecedented run of greatness. Even if the guy who is widely considered to be the best coach of all time, and I suppose pseudo-general manager of all time, claims that they had to sell out to reach and win all those Super Bowls. Because when you take a look back, it's pretty clear that this is not the case. New England has actually spent well below the league average in 7 of the last 10 years per NFL Players Association records, including in Super Bowl years of 2014, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And this year, New England's cash spending has plummeted, while the league average is $205.9 million. This is likely a reaction to last year when the Patriots spent $204 million, about $8 million above the league average. That includes the $5 million they wasted on Antonio Brown and the $3.6 million they spent on trade deadline acquisition Mohamed Sanu. It has gotten to the point that their spending is now only ahead of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who aren't exactly known for being the pinnacle of success in the NFL. And that's something that salary cap experts around the NFL attribute to a few key misses on the free agent market last season. And now, all of a sudden, Belichick has released some conveniently timed comments. Suspect. These comments didn't draw ire from the folks around sports media either. In fact, one former Packers executive, who has since transitioned into a career as a player's agent, Andrew Brandt, had some interesting thoughts on this. It is worth mentioning that Brandt apparently felt strong enough about the decision that he even decided to put his name to a comment that essentially scoffed at what he perceived to be a lazy excuse on Belichick's part. Here's how he put it. Bill Belichick blaming the salary cap for his team's issues is a good one. Not surprised you would say it, but surprised anyone would believe it. And you know what? If you take a closer look at the Patriots' cap situation this past season, and some of the decisions they've made on certain personnel going into it, well, it seems like Belichick's haters might just have a point this time. At the beginning of the offseason, it is true that the Patriots were in a bit of a precarious spot financially. In fact, the Patriots were somewhat tight to the salary cap for most of the offseason, in part because they were carrying about $26 million in dead space for players no longer on the roster. A group of players that included quarterback Tom Brady, receiver Antonio Brown, and kicker Stephen Gostkowski. 3 guys that, I might add, are now playing key roles on other big-time playoff contenders. But I digress, because while New England was initially strapped for some cash, that was before they had 8 players opt out of the 2020 season entirely because of concerns surrounding COVID-19. That ended up giving them a pretty significant chunk of cap room to play with. And what did they do? Well, my friend, I'm glad that you took the time to ask, because man, was it a doozy. In a league that has a soft salary cap and an organization that has millions of dollars to play with, the Patriots have traditionally been one of the more creative organizations when it comes to finding ways to maximize their cap dollars and get talented players on their roster. Unfortunately for New England, they decided to shell out just under $15 million for an offensive lineman, left guard Joe Thuney, when they slapped him with the franchise tag instead of a long-term deal, which would have created a scenario that would have lowered his cap hit for 2020 considerably. Then there is the just under $10 million that they've allocated to another guard in Shaq Mason. Oh, and how about the $5.4 million cap hit for Devin McCourty? Truly a collection of masterstrokes from the man that many around the NFL consider to be infallible. But just because these moves look questionable at face value doesn't mean that there isn't a bit of strategy at play behind the scenes. And to take it a step further, when you look at the pattern of their offseason acquisitions, it is apparent that there actually is a strategy in place. Back in July, when the Pats were in the news because they had a shocking amount of COVID-19 related opt-outs, 8 to be exact, they continued to surprise people by appearing not to be in a rush to fill any of the newly created vacancies, particularly not on any veteran players who might come along with any relatively substantial cap hits. This has left New England with just over $33 million in cap space as it stands. And where it gets even more interesting is, because of the pandemic, New England will be able to roll over every single dollar of cap space into next year's number, which will be critical because the salary cap is forecasted to drop all the way from $198 million to as low as $175 million because of the financial restrictions that COVID-19 has imposed. So while Bill Belichick may want to come out and cry poor, citing the last few seasons of extravagant spending whilst chasing Super Bowls, it appears that that is not the case. Instead, New England is self-imposing some spending restrictions to position themselves better for next season, perhaps pegging the 2020 season as a lost cause in the first year post-Tom Brady. After Belichick got some significant backlash following his recent cap-related comments, don't expect him to admit anything further. But if you ask me, it looks like something is afoot in New England. But what about you? Do you think the Patriots will be able to bounce back in 2021? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. But hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thank you for watching and we'll see you guys next time.